Today I'm showing you my build in this elite MicroATX case. Ryzen CPU, 9070 XT, ASRock motherboard, Patriot memory, Sudoku liquid cooler, let's go. Let's get right into the build, starting with the Jonsbo Z20 case. At first, I wasn't a fan of the 4 screws that hold each panel in place. They're kind of awkward to handle, and I prefer a panel that doesn't need screws to hold it in place, but these screws make it look really good, giving it sort of that industrial bolted on look to the case. This side bracket here, not only does it help hide PSU cables, it actually holds the PSU in place, and you'll see that later in the build. Taking the back panel off, same awkwardness as the front panel, probably because I'm wearing these stupid gloves. I'm trying not to make fingerprints, but I hate these. Anyway, the panel is completely vented. And here's where the Z20 shines, the cable management. I particularly enjoy this channel up here, and you can see all the space here behind the power supply, and the PSU height can be adjusted if need be. Let's get the PSU bracket removed. Just have to unscrew the bracket and pop it out. And here is the removable front dust filter for the PSU fan. The power supply I plan on using was the Phanteks Revolt, an ATX PSU, but I end up changing it out halfway through the build to a SFX PSU, and you'll see why. But first, look at this accessory box. Jonsbo, if you're watching this, you are awesome. And nobody is making accessory boxes packed quite like this. Rear dust filter in it, GPU support bracket, case handle, etc., and more. I am going to use the rear fan as intake, so I will be using this dust filter. And might as well show you the bottom filter while I'm at it. All of these filters are magnetic. ASRock sent me this board to use, the Phantom Gaming B850 Riptide MicroATX board. PCI Express Gen 5 for the CPU and the top SSD, and space for 3 total M.2 SSDs. It has a 6-layer PCB, more than enough power delivery for the X3D Ryzen's. Nahimic audio, I don't know how to pronounce it. Nahimic. It also comes with the BIOS flashback button, which I'm going to show you now because you definitely want the latest BIOS if you're using an X3D chip on this board, which I'm going to be. So I'm just plugging in the 24-pin power to the motherboard and powering on the PSU. You don't need anything else installed into the board to flash it. Just the new BIOS preloaded onto a USB. And then once that USB is in the proper USB slot on the back, click and hold the BIOS flashback button. It'll blink for a few minutes, then the blinking will speed up. And then if you do it all right, the blinking will cease, meaning it's done. So then I can unplug the USB and PSU and continue with the newest BIOS on the board before I even ever had to put the CPU into the socket. I decided to use my 9950 X3D chip in this build. I think it's overkill for this setup because I'm using also a 9070 XT, but I wanted to really test out the all-in-one cooler I'm going to be using, and I wanted to showcase how good the Jonsbo is at airflow. So I wanted as much power and as much heat as I possibly could get from the CPU. And for the RAM and SSD, standard AM5 stuff, 32GB of DDR5 6000 from Patriot, and a 2TB Viper 4300 Lite SSD also from Patriot. The CPU cooler is this all-in-one from Sudoku. This is the Nexora 240mm all-in-one cooler. It's their more budget option. And spoiler, it's absolutely incredible for the price you pay, and I do recommend it. Sudoku sent me a couple of their coolers for other builds, and I like them so much, so I bought this one specifically for this build in this case. It's a very basic and easy to use cooler that just works. So, let me just get the cooler mounting hardware ready, then we can move on. So let's get the PSU bracket that we removed earlier fastened to the Phanteks PSU and get it installed into the case. And I always forget to plug the power cable into the PSU before it's fully installed in these front-mounted PSUs in these cases. This video is no exception. PSU is mounted and I can start running the cables, which was actually really fun and pleasant in the Z20. There's space everywhere, holes everywhere, this awesome top channel. This case is very satisfying to build in. But here's where I started thinking that I didn't want to use a standard sized ATX PSU. I had to flip the power supply so that the fan is intaking air from the case, because otherwise the GPU would end up hitting the PSU cables at the bottom where they plug into the PSU. The XFX GPU that I have is gonna end up in this area and there isn't much space, but we'll get to that a little bit later. For now, let's get this ASRock board in. Probably should have peeled this off before I put the board in, but here I am making the build harder than it needs to be. Once that's in and screwed down, let's plug in the front panel connectors. This is the front panel audio, which needs to run to the back and bottom of the case. This is the power button and activity light. And this is the USB-A and USB-C front connections. And then the power connection. This is the 24 pin. Just fish that through and plug it in. And I had a bit of difficulty with this, just with the crampedness of the case, but it just took some patience. So here I was just kind of planning out the cooler install. I decided to have the tubes come down at the back of the case rather than the front of the case because I was worried about the clearance with the PSU. And I moved the PSU down a bit, but then that was in the way of the GPU, and that pushed me over the edge to just remove the ATX PSU altogether and use my Corsair SFX PSU. So let's just undo all of this. Hey, it's David from the future. You can definitely use an ATX PSU and still use a 240mm all-in-one. You can see how it all kind of fits here. Just have to be careful about the GPU length. This XFX Swift card is 325mm long, and it's making it really hard to plug the cables into the PSU. Some of the cable plugs aren't accessible, so if you do want to use an ATX PSU, make sure your GPU doesn't get all up in here in this area, making a nasty mess. So out goes the Fantex, and in goes the Corsair. Before an SFX unit can go in, I just have to put the SFX bracket on it and then install that the same way that I would as a regular ATX would go into the regular bracket that goes back into the case. Now, the downside to SFX is the CPU power cable is a lot shorter and therefore the cable run barely made it. It's tight and I'm unable to hide the cable as good as I did with the Fantex. This cable was just long enough. Alright, CPU cooler time. The radiator gets mounted to the top bracket, which is screwed down from all angles. So once the screws are all out of that bracket, the bracket just slides out, and it's so satisfying pulling it out. Let's get the radiator mounted, and once again I am mounting it backwards with the tubes coming down at the back of the case instead of the front, just because I want that clearance away from the front power supply area. Then I'm just going to fish the power cord through and plug it into the motherboard, and then we can slide the bracket back in and screw it back into the case. And this cooler just clears the RAM sticks. Next order business, time to mount the pump block to the CPU. Just got to put this AM5 mounting hardware onto the block first that comes included with the cooler. Alright, mounting hardware is proper. Stick the cold plate onto the Ryzen and screw it down. So now I have new concerns. These concerns are these cooler tubes getting in the way of my rear intake fan that I'm going to be putting in. So I need a fan. Which fan should I go with? We'll go with this Fantex M25 reverse blade fan that I pulled out of another build. Hell yeah. So yeah, the fan went in. The tubes are kind of in the way, but it's fine. Everything is fine. No catastrophe here. I ran the rear fan cables along with the pump block cables to the bottom. Daisy chained the RGB and plugged it all into the motherboard and plugged the pump and the fan each into their own fan header. The wires were kind of a mess down here, So I just bunched them together and zip tied them all down to this conveniently located area where all these anchor points are on the bottom of the case. And lastly, we got to install the GPU. First, we got to take this PCI slot bracket cover guard thing off first, remove the PCI slot covers, and then put the GPU in. The GPU is my XFX Swift 9070 XT. And then we can support the card with this nifty support bar. Just gotta assemble it, line up where I want it to support the card from underneath, then screw it in place. I actually really appreciate this support bar. You're able to precisely line it up to where you want it to make contact with on the bottom of your video card. And then we can just supply the power to the GPU, run those cables and plug them in. And then we'll do everything back up and put power to this elite machine. So the case looks awesome, the cable management is awesome, everything is awesome. I did, however, forget to put the top handle on the case though, so I apologize for that. Completely forgot, no excuses, and by the time of this video being uploaded, the case has already been disassembled, so my bad. In terms of temps, the 9950X3D, which is a 16-core, 32-thread beast, never got above 75 in this case under gaming or my content creation. Having just that one rear intake fan and the Sudoku cooler is perfectly fine. The Sudoku cooler is actually really good. Heat is just getting completely evacuated out of this thing at a good rate. Call me impressed with this cooler. And the fans are pretty quiet. I ran them at 60% speed and they weren't a bother at all. The Fantex fan was at 40% speed and it was the loudest fan in the system. And even that wasn't that loud. Great cooler, great case, great setup, great everything. Life is good. Oh, and the GPU never got above 65, and that's with no intake fans for the GPU at all at the front or the bottom of the case. I just let the actual GPU fans built into the card do their thing. I've really been enjoying using as little case fans as possible for my builds lately.